pale notification blooms across the bedroom mirror. Mirrors update at 307 a.m., and the single overhead bulb begins to stutter, so the room flashes between warm gold and a thin, bluish cold that makes your breath fog. The surface of the glass feels oddly slick under your fingertips. Before we go any further, I'll ask you for a favor. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment below this video with what time you listen to this story. You stand beneath the oscillating pool of light, and the world narrows to the rectangle of glass. The bulb hiccups, it coughs warm yellow into the room, then inhales and exhales a paper-thin blue that smells like rain on hot metal. The air folds into two temperatures at once. One side of your face flushes warm from the lamp. The other side goes cold as a freezer door. And every breath you take makes a brief, ghostly cloud that fogs the mirror, then vanishes a half-second later. Your reflection blinks slightly behind you, and that delay is the first hard thing you notice. A small mechanical lag, like an old projector stuttering between frames. Your fingertip drags along the glass and meets an unnerving slickness, not dry, not wet. A lubricated sheen that leaves no smear, but feels as if the mirror itself has micro-movements. A whale-slow slide under your skin. You test it because you are a body that needs proof. You raise your hand and watch the other hand lift a breath later. You count aloud, the numbers sounding too loud in the hush of the night. 1, then your echo in the glass says 1 just after you do. You flip the switch, and the lamp dyes the room drops to a thin blue cold, so sharp it bites at the back of your throat. When you flip the switch again, the light snaps back, and the reflected room retakes its pose, a fraction behind yours. With each test, the delay is not random, it is stacking, building by tiny measures, like a camera reel that has been nudged off its sprockets. Your skin prickles where the cool clings, and goose flesh raises in a patterned stitch along your arms. Condensation paints a quick, perfect trace of your breath. On the inside of the glass, your breath evaporates, but the trace remains a heartbeat longer than it should. A ghost trail that the mirror refuses to drop. That sticking becomes proof you cannot unlearn. The glass keeps a delayed memory. The second face appears when you reach to touch. Your hand moves, slow and careful, fingertips grazing the slick surface. The reflected fingertips respond one blink later, and then something else resolves in the depth behind your own head. A pale, familiar second face that is not yours, yet uses the same mouth. It forms like a spare mask, as if the glass had another layer of you folded in. For a beat it is only there, a shadowed double with a mouth that opens where yours does not, an extra mouth that takes a breath and makes no sound. You feel it before you see it. A prickle along the nape of your neck, the taste of pennies wet on your tongue, a metallic bite that rides the chilled air. Then the other face leans forward and taps the inside of the mirror, 3 sharp knuckles against glass, so sudden and loud that the sound cracks the quiet like a twig under a boot. Your startled reflex is to yank your hand back. The phone on the dresser flips from your fingertips and skitters to the carpet with a dull, frightened thud. When you pick it up, the screen is bright and frozen, 307 a.m., in that same thin font as the notification, and it will not change. Your thumb presses at the display, but the numbers are fixed like a wound. The knock in the glass is gone, and the face is gone too, smoothed away as if the mirror had blinked. But something else has already shifted time, for this room has acquired a hinge-you taste, that hinge as a grit at the back of your teeth. Your palm pressed to the mirror confirms the cold, the undescribable slick, and the shallow stick of your skin to glass when you move a faint print blossoms. And then, unnervingly, a second print blooms a half-second later from the interior. Offset and slightly blurred, the delay is not a trick of your eyes. Now it is a rule. Your breath puffs, and the inside of the mirror fogs a breath length after you exhale, aligning behind you like a delayed echo. Light continues to stutter. Each flick throws the reflected room into a different tint, and each tint makes the lag feel longer. You cannot make the reflection obey you. On the instant, it will answer, always late. That lateness begins to rearrange what you can do. You try to clap, and the clap from the glass comes back, a beat slow and rhythmically off, like a metronome misset. You try to steady your skin temperature, to warm your palms in your pockets, but the chill persists, a patient, damp cold that seems to come from the glass itself rather than the air. The mirror is not just showing you, it is buffering you. There is a new rule that settles into your bones. Whatever you commit in the room happens twice, once now and once a little later, and the mirror keeps the later version. You realize you cannot unknow it when a small, irrevocable consequence makes itself plain. Your wrist, as you jerked back, scraped obsidian smooth, what a thin crescent of skin reddens and stings. The touch is not violent enough to be dramatic, but it is enough to draw your attention back to the glass, where a tiny smear of something, blood, diluted to a rusty pin drop, appears on the inside of the mirror. A half-breath later, it is not merely copying the smear you see on your wrist. It deposits the mark where your wrist had not yet left a mark on the outside. Someone, somewhere behind the pane, has access to the timing of your movements and can place responses in the lag. That knowledge tightens around your throat like a cold band. The mirror can rehearse you, and in rehearsing, it can rearrange outcomes by a hair. You test for agency, because testing is the only way in which a mind tells itself it still has purchase. You waggle a finger, and wait, the glass waggles its finger after you. You smile briefly, and the mirrored smile arrives late, but with a little extra that your own doesn't have, a slight slide at the corner of its mouth that reads like intent. The room's temperature surrenders another degree. The cold leaches shadow into the corners until the dresser's wood looks ashen. You begin to count the lag in fractions, a blink, then a half, then a heartbeat. Each measurement is information, and each piece of information is a narrowing of options. You cannot call someone on your phone because its clock is a nail-it-down hand. You cannot pull the plug on the danger because you have not yet seen what the mirror will do next. Even the lamp seems compromised. Its flicker is not random anymore, but timed to betray the mirror, warming when the reflection wants to soothe, cooling when it wants to sharpen. You think about leaving the room, about walking out and closing the door on the rectangle of glass, but a sticky reluctance fastens to your feet. The mirror has already imprinted a delayed trace of you somewhere in the lag. Is a second you, practicing, watching the lag's rehearsal of your exit. There is no light bulb burst drama, no dramatic pulling down of curtains. The room rearranges instead in a soft, dislocating way. You take a step back, and the reflection steps back late, and there is a brief flash of disparity. Its face is less tired than yours, its blink fresher and more engaged. The lag frames you as a slow-motion version of yourself, as if something polite and precise is learning to be you more smoothly than you are at this hour. That learning is a kind of theft. With each delayed echo, it borrows the present from you and files it away for a later use. The mirror has changed something fundamental, the boundary between now and soon. It has turned time into a surface you can touch, and that surface replies not in mirror, but in second-hand moments. As the bulb breathes and the room flickers between gold and thin blue, you recognize the scope of what you face. This is not a trick of fatigue or the cheap creep of late-night imagination. The room smells of cold metal now, and the taste in your mouth sits like a promise that will not dissolve. You are awake, measured by a reflective thing that answers late and with its own slight variations, and you have irreversibly confirmed the rule. The glass keeps a delayed copy of you, and that copy can place responses into the lag. You stay because knowing feels like power, and because walking away would admit to the mirror what it already suspects, that it can make you keep watching. The notification's gentle bloom, the fixed 307 on your phone, the wet cool of the glass under your fingertips, these details are now part of the room and cannot be unsaid. You realize, with a cold, quick panic in your throat, that the update is not finished. It has merely begun. You test the lag because you have to know how deep it goes, because knowledge feels like control for the moment. You lift your hand slowly, palm cupped to feel the glass cool sheen the bulb hiccups, and the room pulls between gold and thin blue, and your breath fogs the pain in a soft, immediate halo. The reflection lifts its hand a second later, the skin of its knuckles bright with the delayed warmth that follows your chill, and the space between your fingertips and the other you is a suddenly articulate distance, measured, ticked, almost patient. You say the numbers aloud, 1 through 5, feeling each vowel on the back of your teeth. The mirror repeats them like a translation that's half asleep, counting out of sync, and the air in your throat grows metallic. You let your voice trail on the last number, and feel the room cool another degree. Fine hairs along your forearm, prickling under the lamp's stutter. That cold is a thin weight now, not merely a temperature, but a pressure, as if the other side is inhaling the room into a smaller box. You push farther. A whisper of thermal fog blooms opposite your mouth a beat after yours, hanging like a small, patient moth on the inside of the glass. When you exhale harder, the condensation on your side beads and traces of your breath remain on the inside long after the outer film clears. The inner fog traces a curved thumbprint that does not match the pattern you made. You voice a command, raise your hand too, and the figure complies on its slow clock, fingers twitching late against the silvered delay. Each time you repeat the test, the gap stretches an extra fraction, another half second, stacking like misaligned frames in a ruined projector. The pause develops a rhythm, a halting metronome you begin to anticipate, and anticipation tastes like iron at the back of your tongue. You switch the lamp off, and on the room goes to ink, and then floods back, and the mirror obeys the light with a slurred obedience, as though whatever lives behind the glass needs the bulb's spasms to breathe. That thought is new and sharp. The flicker is a valve on. The dresser, the digital clock, blinks 314 and 315 in the same dull, patient way you feel in your bones. Time no longer moves only forward here. You drag a finger across the mirror's surface, and it leaves a reversed smear of wet in the mirrored condensation, an arthritic script that curls into a single crooked letter you can barely identify. Your breath makes a low, wet sound, and the letter seems to settle into the smear like a signature. You knock gently with knuckles pressed to cold glass. The sound on the other side answers a beat late, soft, but not quite mirrored, too bright, like the scrape of a fingernail on bone. Each tap you make is returned with a new inflection, a staccato you can hear in your teeth, a rhythm that feels like someone counting teeth in the dark. The lag is not constant. It yawns open and narrows shut depending on how you provoke it. And that gives you an arithmetic of dread. Tests have cost you something every time. The room's temperature dips another notch, and the hairs on your neck bristle as if fingers brushed down the back of your shirt. Somewhere beneath the hum of the bulb, a low, patient vibration begins to make the frames of the dresser shudder, infinitesimally, like the room itself tuning to a different key. You become more deliberate. Numbers mean nothing now unless you prove them. So you choose a movement that is unmistakable, sharp, and then still. When you clap your hands, your palms sting, and the echo in the mirror arrives with a grin that is properly its own. It is not a smile you remember making. It is too wide for you, the lips too certain, and the teeth a little too bright in the thin blue light. For a fraction of a second, the grin holds, and your heartbeat answers with a single, hard thud in your throat. The image of the grin overlaps yours, and the world snaps, the bulb shattering inward into silence for the span of a breath. The suddenness of the dark is so absolute that you hear the rush of your blood with a clarity that terrifies you. Then the light bleats back harsh, immediate, and the mirror's grin is closer. The glass vibrates against your knuckles when you pull back. The sound is small and glassy. And when you glance down, your phone, balanced on the edge of the dresser, is gone. Your hand smacks cold wood where it should have rested. The loss is clean, final. The phone never hit the floor. You do not find it beneath the dresser. You cannot summon it with calls. Its last screen glowing with a frozen lock pattern in your memory. Something on the other side learned reach by practicing on the empty air, and took the thing that tracked the world you still occupy. That theft changes everything. The room's temperature seems to thicken, an oil slick cool that settles under your collarbone. You realize that each test exacts a price. A borrowed second, a possession, a new proximity. Your mouth tastes of metal and old pennies. You press your palm flat to the mirror, and the other hand meets it late, softer than you expected, but real. There is a pressure, the kind that leaves a dull ache in bone. When you pull away, there is no wet print on your palm, only the lingering, hollow sensation of having been held. The mirror's delay has become a lever it taught itself to manipulate you by mimicking dependence. You breathe in and feel the air come colder. Condensation blooms not only where your warm breath has touched, but in the corners of the glass where you did not breathe at all. Pale ghosts forming like smudges someone else might have left. Your eyes catch a movement. The reflection's head tilts at an angle your neck cannot make, and the angle looks like curiosity grown old. The presence is learning the geometry of your body. You pound the frame in a different rhythm, a staccato meant to cut through the delay. And this time, the mirror answers with a motion that is not late, but anticipatory. Its fingers draw a slow line down the inside of its cheek, and the liquid condensation parts where the line passes, revealing a small, bright eye looking directly at you from within the glass. The eye is not the color of your own, it is colder, a glassy blue that seems to hold the lamp's flicker inside it. Your breath fogs the surface. The reflected eye blinks half a second after you blink, and when it does, the lag shortens. It snaps in, a band tightening. The rule rearranges itself before your face. The more you force the mirror, the less it delays. Tests shrink the gap. You recognize the calculus in a wash of white-knuckled horror. Provocation accelerates the other side. Anything you do that demands a quicker reply gives it a faster foot to push through. Panic tastes like cotton, thick and immediate. You take a step back, and the wood floor sighs under your weight. The lamp hiccups again, and you reach to wrench the plug free, because sometimes the simplest laws apply. If there is power, there is passage. Fingers fumbling, you feel the tactile shock of plastic and the drag of dust. The lamp is warm where you touch its base. Your thumb finds the cord and pulls. Instead of the expected null, the bulb does a slow, theatrical fade. And then, inside the mirror, a motion you did not foresee. Your reflection takes its own hand and points at the plug you are holding. It holds the pose with a clarity that had never been granted before. And when your fingers slip, the plug falls from your grasp. It clatters against the hardwood, and the sound is exactly the sound of your own small, private failure. The mirror's hand is against the glass then, palm splayed. And for the first time you feel as if someone on the other side is feeling you back. Something cold brushes your forearm as you bend to retrieve the plug, not air, but the sensation of a fingertip along skin, a pressure with warmth behind it that demands attention. You jerk upright, and the mirror's two hands press flat to the inside of the glass, slow and almost mournful, as if to plead. The delay that had been a metric now becomes negotiable muscle. You see tears, tiny, precise beads, collect along the reflection's lower lid. And when they fall, they do not streak the glass the way yours would. They beat up, clinging to the inside surface in perfect spheres that refract the room like droplets on a lens. The bulb hovers on the edge of failing again, flickering once, twice, and you hear, clear as an exposed wire, a whisper from the reflected mouth that is exactly the same words you had formed in your head a few breaths ago. Please. The sound lingers a half second later, and you feel the room tighten, the pressure at your sternum like hands pressing on your ribs. If you are listening now, if someone is still pressed close enough to hear this breath, do me a small favor, like the video, and subscribe. Keep your voice low, keep the light steady. After you force that small, abrupt plea into the quiet, the mirror's expression changes, subtle at first, and then absolute. It smiles without the delay you have been training it into. The grin snaps in direct, instant, as if a switch in whatever counts for its mechanics has been thrown. Your stomach drops. The bulb goes steady for a breath too long, and in that single, terrible silence, the interior of the glass ripples outward, an undulation like the surface of bad water. For the first time, the two panes appear not as separated by nothing, but by a thin, pliant skin that can be pushed. The reflection leans forward a fraction of an inch, and the sound of small, sharp glass scraping the frame rings through you like a bell. The pain does not stop the motion. You feel a pressure like velvet against your knuckles. It feels almost tender until the mirror's hand presses harder and a small crack spreads from where its knuckle meets the inside of the glass. The noise is a clean split, a fast, terrifying chirp. In the next heartbeat, the crack blossoms into a web that lights up the reflected room like veins. Air rushes from somewhere on your left, and the lamp skitters, but does not fall. There is an immediate cost. The crack releases a pressure, and something warm, stale, and distinctly human exhales from the mirror's mouth into the room. The breath on the inside fogs into something that coalesces above the cracked line and makes the condensation shiver like a mouth forming words. Your fingertips sting where the glass vibration has hit them. The mirror's delayed world is no longer content to mimic. It has broken its own skin to reach. When you glance down at the floor, the plug you had grasped is half buried in the thin dust by your foot warped. The prongs fused into the wood as if soldered. The loss of the plug is more than inconvenience, it is a proof that objects can move through this tense membrane now. The tests have not merely learned to shorten the lag, they have altered what passage means. The moment is irreversible. The mirror has cracked, and by cracking, has found a thinner place to press through you. Step back, even as the room cools another degree. Your breath loud in your ears, and the mirror's fragmented surface splits your face into many slow, closely related versions. They do not all move together. One of them, a sliver near the webbed fracture, turns its head and watches you like a slow predator, considering the geometry of an escape. The delay has been taught to obey impatience. It will answer faster the harder you strain. The lesson sits between your shoulder blades like a weight. You realize now that everything you use to measure it, light, sound, touch, are the very levers it needed to tighten itself into reach. You have been giving it the means to practice. The room remains a soft blue. The breath on the inside of the glass swirls, forming small shapes that do not belong to you. You cannot unlearn any of this, and the next test, whatever it is, will not be yours to name. The chrome kettle on the hob answered you a half-second late. A slow, polite curl of steam that happened like a hiccup after the one you had just felt. Your breath fogged the inside of the lid in a faint, reverse heartbeat. And for a long second, the stainless surface held two little fog rings, yours, then an afterimage of yours, as if someone a room away had leaned in to copy your exhale. The air tasted faintly of pennies and washing powder, a metallic edge under the sweet soap of the steam, and you found yourself counting quiet numbers because counting gave shape to the delay. Each time you said one, the chrome sighed one beat behind the kitchen tiles, threw back that slight lag as a stuttering rhythm. It was no longer one mirror stealing time. The apartment had become a constellation of small echoes. The kettle, a spoon, the dark eye of the turn-it-off television, all kept their own time, and your hands began to feel conspicuously insufficient, too slow, like you were wearing someone else's gloves. When you dragged a fingertip across the inside of the dresser glass, it left a reversed smear that shivered like a wet letter. At the center of that smear, a crooked line resolved into a single character, backwards and slightly slanted. You did not know how to read it, and yet your throat tightened the way it does when you hear a name mouthed near a door. The thing that had been a delay announced itself as an intelligence by arranging condensation into intent. That arrangement cannot be undone by a hand wave. The moisture had settled into the polish of the pane and would not wipe away with another dry finger. The lag was no longer accidental. It was attention. You moved to the television because eyes in glass demand confrontation. The blank screen gave you back a delayed pupil that did not track you. When you turned your head, your reflection did not follow immediately. Instead, it favored a point 2 feet above your shoulder and stared there as if listening to a different conversation. The set's black skin swallowed sound, but the room did not go silent. A low electric thrum rose from behind the cabinet, and the hairs on your forearms caught gooseflesh as a thin, internal cold threaded your sleeves. Condensation clung to the inner bezel of the set in thin, veined streaks, and those streaks bowed inward, writing a backward stroke that matched the crooked letter you had left on the dresser. The temperature in the room dropped enough that your breath came out in small, crystalline puffs, white and tight like fishbone. Yet the reflection on the screen seemed to carry a warmth around its mouth, a suggestion of heat that tricked the eye. It felt as if two climates had been set in the same room: a blue, biting air where you stood, and a faint, pressable warmth on the other side of every surface. The consequences were immediate and concrete. Where condensation spelled a character on one pane, scorch-like halos appeared around it on another. The chrome on the kettle, the inside of a spoon, the mirror on the doorframe. Letters propagated, not by any logic of wind or heat, but by pattern, as if someone were copying handwriting from glass to glass. You tested this by breathing deliberately long, slow inhales that fogged the dresser, the television, and the spoon. Each pane accepted the fog, arranged it into the same reversed stroke, then hardened it into place. This multiplication of mark-making meant you could no longer assume surfaces were innocent. They were complicit. The presence that had been an idea in the panes became a weight pressed flats against your skin. It did not slam, you had learned to lean. For a heartbeat, the pressure was negligible, a fingertip of warmth at the nape of your neck. And then it sought purchase, as if finding a route into the small hollows you did not notice until something sat in them, your shoulders hunched under the invisible hand. The room's light, still stuttering in that untrustworthy rhythm, cut knives of gold, and then blew across the dresser, and the smear litter glinted between tones, each flash revealing a new curve, as if the letter were breathing through light. You could feel a rhythm, a mirrored respiration. When you inhaled, the letter drew a fraction thinner. When you exhaled, it thickened like ink settling. That synchronization was not benign mimicry. When the letter thickened, the weight on your shoulder tightened. A sound started then, a small, wet rustle like cellophane being smoothed, coming from every pane at once. Frames on the wall shivered in sympathy, and a photograph slid an inch along the mantel, as if pushed by gustless air. Items shifted, not randomly, but aligning themselves to face the surfaces where condensation wrote. A spoon rolled across the counter to lie glinting opposite the dresser mirror, its reflection multiplying the crooked stroke. Object movement was no longer an accident or your mind playing tricks. You had introduced agency into inanimate things, and in exchange, your room had introduced constraints. You could not set a cup down without it finding a point that felt correct to the other side. The apartment had begun to organize itself into a perimeter of attention. You realized, with a brittle clarity, that the reversed character was not a solo cry, but the beginning of a sentence being constructed in backhand around you. Across surfaces, the same stroke repeated and replicated, each instance a fragment folded in reverse. Where the kettle had steamed a curl into the last of the shape, the television's bezel etched a counterpart, and the dresser glass completed a second bar. The dispersed marks coalesced like satellites falling into a pattern. You could almost read them if you turned your head and allowed them their mirrored logic. That knowledge rewired how you moved. Looking at the letters directly made them recede into indecipherable smears. Looking at their reflections, straining to see the backward script corrected by perspective, made them resolve. You tried to photograph one with your phone, thinking perhaps an image would preserve the order without prescribing it. But the camera insisted on your timing. The screen of the phone captured your hand a hair late. The image showed your fingers raised, and behind them, perfectly centered in the phone's glass, the crooked character completed itself into something closer to a name. The phone chimed then, once, an ordinary notification sound that felt obscene in the hush. And when you looked back up, the real room had tilted a fraction, as if the surfaces had sighed together and rearranged the angles. That motion broke the idea that you could treat reflections as mere pictures. They were manipulators of orientation. Now they turned the world a degree at a time, until you walked diagonally, without meaning, to a soft, obscene intimacy threaded through the next hour. Each surface practiced gestures, and each practice reduced your margin for error. At the sink, the spoon's afterimage froze with its handle pointing toward the dresser by the time you reached to move it. Your motion lagged behind by an acknowledged beat. The consequence was immediate. Your hand closed where the spoon should have been, and instead hit emptiness as the spoon moved a fraction, as if being guided by a palm on the other side. Air carried the faint perfume of steam, and something else, something like warm laundry or a jacket left too long in a car, so close that it made the back of your throat ache with memory. In the mirror, the crooked line spread a hair wider, and for the first time formed a second stroke next to it. It was not yet a full word, but the alignment of marks across disparate surfaces assembled the idea of a call. You sat down hard on the edge of the bed. The duvet whispered in the sudden motion, and your pulse pushed at your temples. The pressure against your shoulder withdrew and flattened the way a pressed leaf flattens in a book. And in that thin vacuum, a whisper, too small to be a voice, too intentional to be wind, leaned along the inside of the glass and spelled with the leftover warmth where breath clung the last curve of the letter you had first seen. You felt then the rules shifting. They could build language, they could coordinate touch, and most urgently, they could make choices about what to leave and what to keep. Whatever was arranging condensation had begun favoring things that bore attention. Names, hands, the soft architecture of you. At the end of that hour, the room settled into a new geometry. Surfaces no longer merely reflected, they pointed and wrote, keeping time with a respiration that was both yours and not yours. The crooked letters stood now on at least 5 panes, each instance carved into the inner sheen like a tattoo reversed. From the kettle's lip to the television's face to the dark window glass that looked out onto the black of the street, the mark repeated. A single crooked motif multiplied until it felt like the beginning of a map. You understood something the way a person understands a snapped twig in the dark. The marks were not random, they were an ordering principle. They hinted, shadowed, towards something that would be completed only when you could not look away. That one realization demanded a decision you could not make lightly, ignore them, and risk whatever attention grew in quiet, or interact, and see how far the other side would go in answering. The room cooled by degrees, breath turning visible with every exhale, and with each visible breath, the letters tightened their strokes, patient and deliberate. The last thing you felt before you moved a choice shaping your limbs was a warm, gentle press at the inside of every pane, like someone cupping their palm against glass to steady themselves before stepping into a room they had only ever watched from. You unplug the cord with hands that tremble despite the shock of cold under your nails, and the moment the power leaves the back of the glass, something breathes. The panel gives off a low, resonant inhalation that vibrates through your knuckles, like the last note of a throat clearing somewhere far behind your sternum. The room's single bulb wavers, then steadies into a thin, honest light. It does not warm you. Behind the mirror, the hum is not electrical so much as animal, a wet intake that carries the scent of metal and old rain. You pry at the frame because you must know whether this is wood and glass or a skin that will peel. The edge is slick with the condensation you made earlier, and it resists as if the mirror has teeth. When the frame finally gives, it comes away with a long, slow suction that lifts a fine dust and the smell of ash. The mirror is heavier than it looks, and as you hold the cold backboard against your palms, you realize the surface is no longer passive glass, but a thin, urgent membrane. Your fingers press into its rim and feel, impossibly, the pulse of something on the other side. 2 beats, then 3, and you hear your own breath answered a half-second late inside the silent wooden chest of the dresser. You step backward because every muscle wants distance, because the reflected room no longer mirrors but rehearses you. And when you do, the thing you thought would restore order, swinging the glass away from the wall, the reflection does not flinch. It takes a small, careful step that you did not make, precise as a puppeteer's gesture, so that for the first time your image occupies a place your body no longer fills. The mass between you and your likeness shifts the air. It throws the temperature in the room like a gate slamming. Cold moves across your shoulders in a band, as if someone pressed a chilled palm there and held it. The mirror, still throbbing softly against your palms, becomes a rectangle of rehearsed motion. Your mouth opens an instant before your lips in the glass form, the same shape your left hand, lifts a fraction of a second before the other hand decides to respond. A sound no louder than the whisper of fabric ticks behind you. The latch of the dresser falling open somewhere, or perhaps the distant click of the kettle's handle from hours ago. The timing of things has changed. Where once delay was a curiosity, now delay is a lever. You try to put the mirror down. It resists orientation, angling wrong, refusing to show the ceiling where the bulb hangs steady. Instead, it offers you a depth that dares you to measure it. The other side looks back with a half-second autonomy, and your reflection's eyes are fixing on a point behind you where nothing stands. Then it reaches. The movement is so deliberate, the room seems to hold its breath in sympathy. You feel the air thin like a throat closing. Your reflection lifts a hand, and the fingers slide toward the inside of the glass with a wet sound you had not expected, like lips parting against a window on a freezing morning. You swing away, muscle memory pulling you back until your shoulder hits the dresser's corner. The mirror, freed from the wall, moves too, angling its face with you in a mimicry that is not mimicry anymore. The fingers of your reflection press flat to the inner surface, and impossibly, the skin on your shoulder puckers under the same rhythm, as if someone on the other side of the world were testing the elasticity of your flesh. Then contact, a cold, hard fingertip lands on the meat of your shoulder with a small, decisive tap that is both banal and intimate. It steals the heat from a coin-sized patch of skin, leaves it numb and pale, and in that precise instant, your stomach drops the way it does on a steep stair. A single animal sound, your throat caught in throat, escapes you. The mirror does not make a sound as it seems to lean into you. The room's steady bulb hummed and steadied a fraction. Lower, the temperature falls like a hand, smoothing a wet cheek. A sharp metallic tang floods your mouth. When you look down, there is no bruise, only a ring of frost that spreads thin as talc across the shoulder. Where the fingertip rested, the consequence arrives before you can name it. The mirror slips from your palms, as if some gravity reversed it falls with a dull thud that sends the taste of ozone rushing into your teeth. For a moment, the pain is upright and obedient, showing nothing but the bed it no longer points toward, an empty mattress with a sheet folded under no weight. And then it slides sideways and comes to rest on the carpet, face up, exposing a world inside that is not your room at all but your bed from a distance. The lamp's bulb reduced to a steady pinpoint of light at the frame's edge. You are not inside that frame. When you spin toward the dresser where you have always seen yourself, your reflection is missing from where it should be. Instead, the dresser glass holds a person who looks like you, but who does not move when you do. Their head turns, slow and deliberate, and their eyes meet yours like a deliberated accusation. Your breath fogs against the inside of that glass on the far side and lingers, a pale smear that does not dissipate with the same economy as your real breath. You reach to touch the dresser mirror, and your hand finds cold, but the surface gives you back nothing of yourself. In its place, there is awareness, a small, concentrated pressure against the inside of the pane, as if something there is leaning to press harder and learn the texture of you. The room has been simplified into two states, inside and outside, and something has chosen a side. Silence settles after the fall, heavy and calibrated. Your chest moves a fraction faster than it should. Breath coming in short edits the humid ghost on the floor mirror blots like a wet fingerprint where the fingertip once found your shoulder. You realize, with a clarity that is as sharp and useless as glass, that the exchange has a cost. The mirror that lies on the carpet shows your empty bed, and the person behind the dresser glass watches you with an attention that feels like ownership. You cannot get inside the fallen frame, and you cannot pull the person out the other glass either. The air presses against your ears with the muted insistence of a heartbeat, not your own. If you had a watch, you'd find the hands moving without the metronome of seconds you depend on. Your mouth tastes of copper and old paper. Slowly, deliberately, the fog on the inside of the fallen mirror unfurls like a breath coming to a word, and the condensation pools into the arc of a letter, then another. It spells a name that is not the update, not a time stamped in pale LED, but the one you have used to answer when someone called you at an unkind hour. It writes your name, stroke by patient stroke, and the hand that guides it does not hurry. That is when you understand the softness of its correction. The update promised a time. This is a correction to identity itself, an editorial mark across the margin of who you are. The breathing in the glass dims, slow and deliberate, like an animal satisfied. You back away from both mirrors until your heels find the spine of the bed. The room reads as ordinary again, lamp steady, dust mote suspended, except for the two panes that hold pieces of you now in altered archives. The light is steady, the hum is gone. The last thing you feel is a pressure at the base of your neck, as if someone had leaned in to hear better. A perfectly ordinary room, a steady light, and a framed mirror whose inner surface carries a slow, patient breath. If you felt that, like the video, subscribe to my channel and tell me what time you heard this.